Coming up in this week's Torah Pills.
Why is it that AI models cannot seem to generate a proper menorah?
Is the pattern of the Tabernacle divinely instructed, or is it deliberate Egyptian propaganda appropriation?
Did God give King David a written blueprint for the temple?
Is there a giant multicolored magical kosher unicorn in the Bible?
What was kept in the Ark of the Covenant?
The menorah, as we know it today, is it the menorah that the ancient Israelites knew?
All right, Jono, let's jump into this thing.
Come on, Ross, let's do it now. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company once again here on truth2u.org. That's truth2u.org. I'm Jono Vandor, and joining me from the HOREB Institute in Louisiana is, of course, Ross Nichols, the author of the Moses Scroll. G'day, my friend.
Hello, Jono. How are you, my friend?
Doing pretty well. My neck's a bit stiff, so if I'm doing this, that's why I can't really move it very well at the moment. But I'm all right.
If we're going to confess our weaknesses in the flesh, then I'm alive. I'm alive, but I tell you, thanks to the prayers of the people, the saints of the Most High must have lifted me up. I'm drinking tea, trying to make sure I'm in good shape, but I'm ready, man. I'm ready. I'm ready as I can be.
You've had the flu, and you're almost over it, so that's good. Season 3 of Torah Pills, that's where we are, brought to you by Tanakh Tours, Tanakh, TanakhTours.com is where you'll find the website. We are going back to Egypt, Jordan, and Israel, Ross, is where we're going this November. And g'day to everyone who's signed up. And there is still room.
That's right.
If you would like to join Ross and I on that adventure. This week, we are in Terumah. And to kick us off, we have our AI critical scholar, Ezra. Ezra, give us a summary of the more controversial aspects of this Torah portion from a critical perspective.
Of course. Terumah covers the divine instructions for building the tabernacle, Mishkan, and its furnishings, starting with the call for voluntary offerings, gold, silver, bronze, and all sorts of materials. The portion dives into detailed blueprints for the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, the altar, and the sacred tent itself. From a critical perspective, especially through the lens of the documentary hypothesis, Terumah is considered part of the priestly P source. The P source is known for its obsession with ritual, order, and the sacred. Hence all the architectural and material specifics. This meticulous detail serves not just a liturgical purpose, but also a political one, emphasizing the authority of the priestly class over Israelite worship. One of the more controversial aspects is the lavishness of the materials. Critics have pointed out the tension between the opulence described and the desert setting where the Israelites were supposedly nomadic and resource-strapped. Some scholars suggest that these descriptions may not reflect an actual historical project in the wilderness, but rather a retrojection of later temple ideals back into the Mosaic period. Additionally, the Ark of the Covenant with its cherubim, winged, quasi-divine figures, raises eyebrows. These elements seem to brush up against Anakinism, a central tenet of Israelite religion. Were these cherubim a carryover from older Canaanite religious traditions where cherub-like figures served as throne guardians? It's possible. This blending of older cultural motifs into Israelite worship is a fascinating example of syncretism, showing how traditions evolve and absorb surrounding influences. So, Terumah isn't just about sacred architecture. It's also a window into how Israelite religion was negotiating identity, power, and tradition. What do you think? Are there specific elements of the tabernacle's design that stand out as particularly intriguing or problematic to you?
Hey, Israelite religion negotiating identity, power, and tradition.
See, if I were to summarize, and I mentioned this off air to you earlier on, if I were to summarize this Torah portion, Ross, I might characterize it as propaganda appropriation. And it's interesting that Ezra has floated the question, were the cherubim a carryover of older Canaanite religious traditions? And you and I did a program, actually. We talked about the cherubim in great detail.
Right.
We're going to be touching on it, obviously, in this Torah portion as well. Was it a carryover of Egyptian depiction as well? So we're going to be touching on that. But yeah, that's I like that, Ezra. I think that's good.
Yeah,
What are your
that
thoughts?
was really good. Yeah, well, the first thing I think you're right. We're going to have to get into not only the cherubs and all these other things and motifs and whether they're borrowed or, but it starts. It's Terumah. It's an offering. It's from those who have a willing heart. Right?
Is it an offering, Ross? So I have a question about that. And
All
this,
right.
like Ezra just pointed out, this is priestly material. And actually, I think
Oh,
this
yeah.
is the largest. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ross, but I think this is the largest unbroken chunk of priestly material that we've come across so far. Would that be fair?
So far, definitely so far. I was about to say, well, we've got a lot of priestly material ahead of us. In fact, by the way, Jono, from Exodus chapter 25, which is where we're at, all the way through the end of Exodus, there's a lot of priestly material. Then we get into Leviticus. It's just about, it's all P. Numbers is a lot of P. So we're in the world of, we're in the priestly world right now. Welcome to P. The priestly world. That's
exactly right. That's it. That's where we are. And so 25 verse 1 kicks off with, and this is in the Torah tablet, it says, "And Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they take for me an offering of every man whose heart maketh him willing, ye shall take my offering. And it's interesting in the Jewish Study Bible, the way that it kicks off, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, Tell the Israelites to bring me gifts, Ross.
That's right. That's God saying.
Go and tell them to bring me gifts. Now this made me think of a couple of other verses, which I will bring to your attention right now.
I'm ready.
Namely, Psalm 50, verse 9 to 13. Actually, let me kick off with, there's quite a few of these in the Psalms, and there's a few in the Torah as well.
All right.
Psalm 24, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, Ross, the world and those who dwell therein. And of course, but 59 to 13. I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your folds, for every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills, and I know the birds on all the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, Ross, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. I do not eat the flesh of bulls and drink the blood of goats.
Wow.
So I like that. Let's try another one. 89:11. The heavens are yours. This is someone speaking to God. The earth also is yours, the world and all that is in it. You have founded them. In our Torah, Exodus chapter 9, verse 29, Moses said to him, As soon as I have gone out of the sea, I'll stretch out my hand to the Lord, and the thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, that you may know, he's speaking to Pharaoh, I guess, that the earth is the Lord's. We have a similar one in 19:5, all the earth is mine, and Deuteronomy 10:14, Behold, the Lord your God belong heaven and the heaven of heavens, the earth, and all that is within. And then finally, 1 Chronicles 29:11, Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty, and all of the heavens and all of the earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord. You are exalted as head above. Now let's return to ours, which says, Tell the people to bring me gifts.
Well,
come on, Ross.
Maybe those gifts were before he had all this other thing, that you just mentioned. Hey, what about, let me add one to your list, just because it struck me. That's a powerful list of passages you just gave. I was thinking of Isaiah 66, 1 and 2. Heaven is my throne, the earth is my footstool. What is this house that you would build for me? What is the place of my rest? All these things my hand has made. And so all these things came to be. Basically, what could you possibly give God unless you had gold and silver? I mean, what else can you think of?
That's it. So it's a very different voice. It's a very different agenda. It seems.
Fine
when we
linen,
read this priestly material, it's more.
Hair.
It's a little bit like perhaps the priest is saying, "Hey, you bring us all this fine stuff because for God, you bring it." Yeah. It's a little bit like that. And these are the gifts, Ross, that you shall accept from the people.
Ready.
Gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yards, fine linen, goat hair, tanned ram skins I have here, Dolphin skins. Go out and catch me some dolphins and pull off their skin. I like a bit of that. And acacia wood. Oil for lighting, spices, anointing oil, and for the aromatic incense. What do you have in your Torah tablet?
Basically, it's almost the same, but the offering is gold, silver, brass, blue, purple, scarlet, fine linen, goat's hairs, ram skins dyed red. They have to be red, Jono. Seal skins. Yeah, I guess like, this kind of seal, like clap. Acacia wood, oil for the light, anointing oil, sweet incense, stones to be set for the ephod and the breastplate. Yeah, it's a complete list.
Hey, here's a question. Sorry, is this the first time we hear about the ephod and the breastplate?
I believe it is.
Just all of a sudden. Okay.
Yeah.
Make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. All right. Well, I guess the major discrepancy there, Ross, is did they catch dolphins or did they catch seals and peel off the skin for the tabernacle?
Yeah, I was hoping you could help me. I looked it up, Jono, and I got several different options. One is a narwhal. You know what a narwhal is? Like, we have to look it up. I was going to say let Ezra tell us what a narwhal is, but it's this water. Isn't it a water creature with this big horn in the middle of its head? And I think that's what it is.
It's like a unicorn dolphin. Is that fair?
It's like a water corn. Yeah, a unicorn in the
unicorn
water.
Seal or something like that.
Something like that. And and one is, but then there's some other things like badger and goat and antelope. So like I think the first thing I thought when I got into this was, I don't think anybody knows what this is. And then I said, but I know the rabbis are going to know. Did you happen to look?
And we have to check. You know what? I'm also looking at the Holman here, and it says manatee. While we're in that field, like
a manatee,
seals, dolphin.
Yeah.
What was the one you said? A narwhal? That's the one with the unicorn.
Yeah, narwhal.
They're incredible creatures, and a manatee. And I've got seal skins. What else have I got? I'm just seeing if there's anything unusual. Fine leather. It's some cow hides. No.
Yeah.
Badger skins. Sea cow hides. Now, this is interesting.
Cow.
All of a sudden, I find myself in the literal standard version, and it says, Ross, tachashim. Okay, what do the rabbis say? Fill me in.
Well, here's what I found. And just by the way, I did want to say, we don't have to go to all the verses, but in Exodus, I have Exodus 25:5, 26:14, 35:7, 35:23, 36:19, and 39:34 all mention tachashim, which is translated whatever, seal skins, whatever. And then in Numbers, it appears in the singular, all in chapter 4 of Numbers, and it's takash. So anyway, here's what the rabbis say. And by the way, this is off of the wonderful website, very, very helpful, Sefaria.org, Sefaria, Sefaria.org. And it says, the Gemara asks, what is the halakhic conclusion? This is Shabbat 28b. Shabbat 28b. What is the halakhic conclusion reached about this matter of the takash that existed in the days of Moses? Rabbi Ella said, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, the Rabbi Meir used to say, the takash that existed in the days of Moses was a creature unto itself, and the sages did not determine whether it was a type of undomesticated animal or a type of domesticated animal. And get this, Jono, it had a single horn on its forehead, and this takash happened to come to Moses for the moment while the tabernacle was being built, and he made the covering for the tabernacle from it. And from then on, Jono, the takash was suppressed and is no longer found. So this mythical creature, they don't know if it was domesticated or undomesticated, but it appeared to Moses like, here I am at your service, sir. And Moses was able then to kill it, I guess, and skin it.
Well, I hope he killed it before he skinned it.
Yeah, but I guess, I mean, so what is it? So it's a unicorn from what I understand. Here, let me read this one more thing. Now, the Gemara, I got one more.
Go ahead.
The Gemara comments, from the fact that it is said that the takash had a single horn on its head, conclude from this that it was kosher. And then it goes into the ox that Adam, the first man, sacrificed as a thanks offering for his life being spared. It also had a single horn on its forehead, and it goes on and it ties in a couple of other mythical, I guess, occurrences maybe of this creature. But anyway, only to Moses, only when he needed it, and then never again.
Never again. Well, so just to go further with that, it was created specifically at that time for this reason. So God has created this tachash, which is apparently about 15 meters long, almost 50 feet, right? Big animal.
Wow.
And that's according to what's that tractate Terumah? Tanakh Terumah 6:1. And it was created for it. So God's like, create this life. There it is, Moses. We assume that he killed it and then peeled off its skin, made the tabernacle covering. Now, this is a multicolored animal, by the way. Apparently, it had 6 colors, Ross.
Six
takash.
colors.
6 colors, and it was needed because you can't have the problem is, Ross, is that you can't have a dolphin or badger or seal or manatee or narwhal. You can't have any of those because they're not kosher, Ross, and we can't have that.
All right.
You have to have a kosher animal, and the best way to do that is to invent one or to create one, and have Moses kill that one and make it big so that it can cover the. And so that's what happens. So it's a magical unicorn created for that purpose only. Was it one of? According to, as you pointed out, Ross, according to Numbers, there's one of, and according to this, we have tachashim.
Well, let me just. Oh yeah, I was just going to say the ones in Numbers, it's all singular, but it's still takash. So I assume that whatever creature this is, it's describing the same things. The same things that are made for the tabernacle, the priestly place. But go ahead. No,
yeah. There you go. So it had to be kosher. We can't have unkosher animal skin on the holy tabernacle, and that's the way that you solve that problem. The mythical.
Well, there's one other thing that
unicorn
that our viewers might like to know about this skin. It not only was it used to make these items associated with the priestly tabernacle, but there's also a passage in Ezekiel 16. I don't know if you have this one in your notes. Did you get it? So this is Ezekiel 16:10. I clothed you with embroidered garments and gave you sandals of dolphin leather. That's from the same idea, I think, is what they're saying, to wear, and wound fine linen about your head and dressed you in silks. So I guess these are like unicorn sandals.
Multicolored, Ross. Multicolored unicorn shoes that must be, super fine leather. I think that's why, perhaps off the back of this passage, that sometimes it's referred to as fine leather. Like it's sort of your fancy Nikes. If you've got some takash shoes, you're doing pretty well. But this is what has driven, I think it's Stephanie Daly, and I'm reading from a Torah.com article here. A Syriologist at Oxford University argues that it is beaded leather, I think, is her conclusion. That is what takash is. And she cites an example of Egyptian beaded leather sandals.
What is beaded leather? What is it? Just something in the process? Do you know?
It is. So it's leather, but it's been interwoven with fancy beads. Making patterns with fancy beads.
Maybe. I got you.
That's why. Another suggestion is that it refers to a color, and that's why we have some translations referring to a type of color of the leather or the whatever it is. And there's arguments about what color it is, if it is a color as well. But the way that Judaism deals with it is that it's a magical multicolored unicorn created specifically for this time so that Moses could kill it, peel off its skin, and make a covering for the tabernacle.
And it is. I know we're being a little bit silly with this, but it's been a long standing. I know, no, yeah. I know, but that's what I was going to say. But there is a big question. You're like, where? This is what made people curious about the whole story anyway. It's like, where are they getting all this? Well, a lot of people would say from the fundamental side. Well, the fundamentalist side, they left Egypt. They got presents from their Egyptian captors, and some of that could have been, some dolphin skins from the Mediterranean or whatever. Who knows? But so there is that idea of where it came from. But what is so silly is some of the answers to where, what is dolphin skin or what is porpoise skin? What is tachashim? I don't know. Anyway, very interesting. But it's all required to make a sanctuary, Jono.
To make a sanctuary. Exactly in verse 9, exactly as I show you the pattern, Ross, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make it. What pattern, Ross?
Well, it's funny. There is, the first thing I was going to say is where it says make a sanctuary. You touched on a little bit of this earlier, some of the same verses. Is God going to dwell in a house? Look at the way it reads before we move into this Tavnit. In verse 8, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the furniture thereof, even so shall you make it. And one of the things that I find interesting is this idea of God dwelling in a house is also something which is challenged by another tension in the text. We have some passages which indicate that God is in the midst. He's dwelling in the midst of the people. Then we have another view that God is separate from. The heaven of heavens can't contain you, 1 Kings 8:27. Again, Isaiah 66, we just read. Same idea. Where is this house that you would build for me? Heaven is my throne. The earth is my footstool. I'm not going to live in a house made of hands. By the way, there are a couple of really taking the same view even in the New Testament. Acts chapter 7, verse 49. Same. I think that's Stephen's speech. He's like, it's been a while. But anyway, that's the idea. Can God live here on earth? He's certainly not going to eat whatever food you bring him, blood of bulls and goats But there is something about this Tavnit that the priestly writers want us to get. Now, the root word of Tavnit is the word bana, which means to build. So it's almost like a building plan. And I've taught this in the past. I like the idea. It's not a fundamentalist belief anymore for me, but it is still sort of rooted to the text. I wonder if the writer is not suggesting that this is sort of a blueprint, because over and over we'll see some of this in our discussion, where God says, do this, Moses, just like you saw it in the mountain. Make everything that I'm telling you just according to the pattern. So I think a good way to call Tavnit is a blueprint or a pattern. Those are the words that I had. What do you have, Jono? Do you have something different than that?
Yeah, well, just speaking of the tabernacle and the furnishings, it's interesting to me that Brettler has in the Jewish Study Bible a note, and he talks about this in some detail, actually, on page 166 for those who have it. He goes on to say that the symbolism thus represents God as king and the Holy of Holies as a literal seat of divine government, and this symbolism is consistent with the fact that architecturally, and speaking of the pattern, architecturally the tabernacle resembles a royal residence, particularly the royal tent in Egypt military camps. It is also structural, similar in structure to temples of surrounding nations. So again, that goes a little bit to the question that Ezra asked, but more specifically, Ross, and I love this because we've already touched on this a number of times, but Joshua Berman, who makes the connection of the Battle of Kadesh and the imagery of the Battle of Kadesh with the Exodus story, the chariots in the sea, and the Kadesh poem to Exodus chapter 15. We talked about that back there.
Yeah.
But he points out that scholars have long noted and an affinity between the biblical descriptions of the tabernacle, the design thereof, the pattern thereof, and the illustrations of the Ramesses Battle of Kadesh camp formation. So Ramesses has his tent, and the way that he arranges his army around him. He has a sort of a meeting room, and then inside the Holy of Holies, if you like, he has his own personal room. And we have that in bas reliefs in wherever the Kadesh poem is accompanied, and it's I think in let's see, it's going to come to me. Abu Simbel. I don't know if we're going all the way down there, by the way, when we get to Egypt.
I think I saw it when we had the itinerary for the last trip. I just need to check.
I'm going to have to double check. Because it is a bit of a distance. But what we have is proportions of Ramesses' throne tent surrounded by his army on four sides, and it exactly matches those of the tabernacle sanctuary as depicted here in Exodus. So there's a lot of scholars point out and say this is clearly the blueprints, if you like, for the way that the tabernacle is, the dimensions thereof, the way that it faces, and all that sort of stuff.
Can we? I don't want to interrupt you on a roll here, but can we ask Ezra if he can give us sort of a high level connection between Egypt and okay?
Yeah, ask Ezra if connections between Ramses II's camp formation and the tabernacle.
I get where you're going with this. While I won't give you a straight up list, gotta keep it podcast friendly. Let's dig into the comparisons scholars often draw between Ramesses II's military camp at Kadesh and the tabernacle layout. When Ramesses II set up camp at Kadesh, around 1274 BCE, his encampment was organized in a very regimented, almost ritualistic manner. The camp had a central rectangular area with his royal tent at the heart, surrounded by his troops arranged in a grid-like formation. This centralized, sacred-like space with ordered surroundings echoes the layout described for the Israelite camp in the wilderness, with the tabernacle at the center and the tribes encamped around it in a specific order. Both setups create a strong visual of hierarchy and divine or royal authority. In the Egyptian camp, Ramesses' tent functioned almost like a mobile temple, emphasizing his divine kingship. Likewise, the tabernacle served as a physical manifestation of divine presence, with the Ark of the Covenant as its core, not unlike how the Pharaoh would be the central godlike figure in his camp. There's also the practical and psychological element. Whether for a military or religious setting, such ordered arrangements reinforce discipline and unity. Scholars who lean into the critical perspective suggest that the Israelite camp model could have been influenced by these kinds of Egyptian or broader Near Eastern paradigms. After all, the Israelites were said to have just come out of Egypt, so it makes sense they might adapt familiar structures to their own emerging identity and theology. This comparison adds another layer to our understanding of the tabernacle, not just as a religious symbol, but also as a tool for community organization and identity building. What do you think? Does the idea of the tabernacle as a kind of divine military camp change how we might view its purpose?
What do you think?
Well, it's interesting that Ezra has left something out. And we're going to get to it just a little bit later. I won't get into it right now.
Maybe he knows. Maybe he doesn't want to jump ahead.
Maybe he doesn't want to jump ahead. But that's right. I mean, there's a whole lot of similarities, and that is why I say that this is because the depictions of Pharaoh's Ramesses' tents and in the center of the camp and all that sort of stuff, and the dimensions thereof, and the way that it resembles the temple and the tabernacle. Having all of that there on reliefs supplies a sort of a blueprints to anyone who wants to appropriate it. And all of these reliefs were made as propaganda to the people of Egypt by Ramesses, saying, look how great I am, and all of the things that I accomplished in my greatness. But it seems to me that that has been appropriated, and that will become all the more convincing as we continue further. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was going to add one other thing. As we think about this, I mean, it makes sense and Ezra touched on this, you touched on it a little bit too. If Israel, all or in part, spend some time in Egypt, they're seeing these things. They're familiar with these things. And it only makes sense that they would adapt some of these things to their new life, at least from the priestly side of things. And one other piece that we have to remember, and I don't know if we're going to get into this so much tonight, but one thing that always strikes me when I read through this priestly material, we have 13 names in the Pentateuch which are Egyptian in origin. 13 names. And all of these are Levites. So it makes one wonder if there is some association, which we'll dig into at great depths later, between these Levites and the Egyptians.
And it's fair to wonder. And so I guess my point is that the question has to be asked, why the Battle of Kadesh? Why Ramesses II? Is it just that they've chosen this to focus on and glean a whole lot of, or appropriate a whole lot of blueprints from or patterns from? Or is it, Ross, because they recalled that this particular moment in history had something to do with aiding their liberation from Egypt? And I think it's probably the latter, but we can certainly talk about that.
Well, one other thing that one other verse I want to touch on with Tavnit, and then we can move on. And it comes from 1 Chronicles 28, Jono. So if you look at 1 Chronicles 28, there are two verses. Verse 11, it says, "Then David gave Solomon his son the plan," which in Hebrew is the Tavnit, "of the vestibule of the temple and of its houses, its treasuries, its upper rooms, its inner chambers, and of the room for the mercy seat," which we're going to get into shortly. Now, this is, first thing I want to point out is that David passes to Solomon whatever this Tavnit is. Now, is it a blueprint? Is it whatever it is? He passes it to Solomon. Now, looking down at verse 19, this is where I wanted to ask you something, Jono. It says in verse 19, "All this he made clear to me," this is David referring to God, "in writing from the hand of the Lord, all the work to be done according to the Tavnit." Now, the reason I bring this up is because this is striking to me. It's almost as if everything in writing is what it says. Everything, the all, hakol, everything in the writing from the hand of Jehovah unto me. Wisely.
Being David, the me being David.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like that this text is suggesting that David receives this pattern to build the temple that he passes on. It reminds me similar to what we see the claim of the priestly writer in Exodus saying Moses received a pattern. Make sure you do this. It's almost like David is saying the same thing. Make sure you do this, Solomon, just like the pattern. So anyway, it's just another.
Let me ask you a question about that, Ross. What is the source that we attribute to the passage you just read?
Well, I mean, it's certainly the chronicler, so it's in Chronicles. So it's not like it's just going to be a priestly source. I mean, it's not, obviously the documentary hypothesis is not governing that text. That's not what we're talking about here. But it's clearly a textual. It's a priestly text that's coming from the court of Judah. It seems. Very interesting. Okay. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that in because I think it's fascinating. And a lot of people don't bring that when they're talking about the Tavnit. But David got a Tavnit just like Moses got a Tavnit. And I think we ought to have.
And these passages read like someone is writing into the text a justification for the existence of something that is already well established.
Yeah.
Is that how it seems to you?
Yeah. And so you wonder how much of this Tavnit language, did it really start in the time of Moses, or is it from the time when the temple is built and then put back on this earlier period? That's the question.
Yeah, that is the question.
Yeah.
So listen, we have in verse 10, they shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 2.5 cubits wide, and so on and so forth. Overlay it with gold, this, that, and the other. And it seems like this is the Ark of the Covenant, Ross.
Yeah. The ark, a box, a chest, aron. But what is it? It's the box of what?
Box of acacia wood?
No, I mean, what goes in it? I mean, I guess that's the...
Oh, well, this is it. And I've got here in verse 16, oh, yeah, and deposit in the ark, Ross, the tablets of the pact, which I will give you. Now,
okay, you must be reading from the JPS.
I'm reading from the
like
JPS. Let me see what you've got here in the Torah tablet. In verse 16, it does say, and thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee. Now, when I read that, Ross, I thought, hang on a second, wait. Which you shall? You haven't yet. God has not yet given Moses the first of all, what is the testimony, and has not God given him the 2 tablets yet?
Well, that's a great question, and it's really kind of interesting. If you compare Exodus and the account in Exodus and the account in Deuteronomy, and you put those side by side, you could almost get the understanding that when the words were spoken aloud to the assembled Israelites, that as soon as that was done, God wrote on the 2 tablets and gave them to Moses. But really, when you do that horizontal reading, you look at those texts side by side, you realize that he doesn't get the tablets until later. And that's later. What I think is very important to point out. So he doesn't have them.
Let's go back in time and just address this, okay? So we're in chapter 24, verses 12 to 18. It says, the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings and the commandments, which I have inscribed to instruct them. So Moses and his attendant Joshua rose, and Moses ascended the mountain to God. The elders, to the elders, he had said, wait here until we return, this, that, and the other. And it goes on, and then that's when Moses, disappears into the cloud. And it says for 6 days, on the 7th day, he called to Moses and in he goes. Okay, so and then we have 40 days and 40 nights, and that's the way that the previous Torah portion ends. And we're thinking, okay, so he's getting it.
Yeah.
But what's in the cloud there, Ross? In that 40 days and 40 nights, there's a lot going on. And then finally we get to chapter 31, verse 18. There.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, it does say, when he finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses the 2 tablets of the pact, stone tablets, inscribed with the finger of God. Okay, so there we are in 31, the end of 31.
Yeah.
That is quite a length later. As you said, Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 9 to 11 is where we find the corresponding.
Yep.
What does that say? It says,
I don't have it.
I had, what's it? It says, this is Moses speaking. I sent it to the mountain to receive the stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant that God had made with you. And I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, eating no bread and drinking no water. And the Lord gave me the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the finger of God. The exact words, Ross, that the Lord had addressed to you on the mountain on the out of the fire on the day of the assembly. Now, you just did a whole program on the day of the assembly, which is excellent. I encourage people to go back and have a look at that.
So the testimony is the 2 tablets, and on the 2 tablets, it's the covenant. And by the way, I want to make a point of this. There is in the priestly material, this is called the testimony, the edut. The edut, over and over, the tablets of the edut, the 2 tablets of the edut. And the ark is known as the box or the aron of the edut. And the tabernacle is known as the tabernacle for the edut. Everything is about the edut, the edut, the edut. But let me tell you something. This is what should strike when we talk about some things that are unique when it comes to understanding the different sources. Deuteronomy never uses the word adut, never uses the phrase adut, nor does the Moses scroll.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about the 2 stone tablets, Deuteronomy calls it the covenant. So when a lot of people know the Ark of the Covenant, they've heard of the popular Ark of the Covenant. Well, that's not the priestly. The priestly knows it as the Ark of the Testimony. But Deuteronomy calls it the Ark or the Box of the Covenant. Or I like to
different
say,
boxes, right?
Yeah, that's right. I like to call it the Covenant Chest. The Covenant Chest. But
so let me I'll just read it from the Moses scroll. This is the section relevant to what we're reading. And this is from GA 10 and on. It says, at HOREB on the day that I went up to the mountain to receive these 2 stone tablets, and upon them was written all the words that Elohim spoke with you in the mount from the midst of the fire on the day of assembly. Notice there's no finger of God. There's no anthropomorphic language in the Moses scroll. You made a molten calf for yourselves and angered Elohim, and I fell down before Elohim in the mountain burning with fire, and the 2 stone tablets were in my hand, and I saw your sin, and I shattered the 2 tablets before your eyes, and I interceded on your account at that time 40 days and 40 nights, because you were rebellious against Elohim. It goes on to say, at that time Elohim said to me, carve 2 stone tablets for yourself like the first ones, and ascend to me on the mount. And I ascended the mountain, and the 2 tablets were in my hand, and Elohim wrote on the tablets the 10 words, just the 10 words, Ross, which he spoke to you in the mount on the day of the assembly, gave them to me, and behold, they are in the chest that I made. And that is, I think that's all we hear about the chest of the covenant in the Moses scroll. Is that right? I'm pretty sure.
That's right. That's right. Now, but the priestly writer has a whole bunch of stuff. Let me ask Ezra, because I'm curious. We're going to get into a little bit in this ark of the testimony. What goes inside the box, right? What's supposed to be in there? Because we have different ideas. Different people have different ideas of what goes in. In fact, they're probably different, I know, in the New Testament. Let me ask Ezra what is in the box. Can I do that?
Do it.
Yes. The contents of the Ark of the Covenant. The Hebrew Bible gives us a few different answers, which can get a little messy from a critical perspective. The most straightforward answer comes from the priestly source in the Torah, which says that the Ark held only the tablets of the covenant, the stone tablets with the 10 commandments. You'll find this in passages like in Kings, where it specifically states that there was nothing in the Ark save the 2 tables of stone. But then we get some curveballs. In Hebrews and other later Jewish traditions, there's mention of additional items, a golden jar of manna and Aaron's rod that budded. While Hebrews isn't part of the Tanakh and reflects later interpretive traditions, it shows how the Ark's contents became a kind of theological grab bag over time. This discrepancy can be explained through a critical lens. Different traditions and sources likely had varying conceptions of what the Ark represented. The Deuteronomistic historians, with their strong focus on covenantal law, emphasize the tablets alone. Priestly and later traditions, with more ritualistic concerns, might have included the rod and manna as symbols of divine provision and priestly authority. And if we go even further into the critical rabbit hole, some scholars suggest the Ark might have originally been a kind of war palladium, a sacred object taken into battle to ensure victory, which aligns with the stories of the Ark leading the Israelites into war. In that early phase, what was inside might have been less important than the Ark's function as a symbol of God's presence. It's a fascinating example of how religious symbols can accumulate meaning and sometimes contradictions over time. How do you reconcile these different accounts? Do you think the Ark's function evolved, or were these traditions simply competing from the start?
Yeah, we did a more detailed program on this as well, on the Ark of the Covenant and what was inside it, and all the different accounts.
Well, let me
quite right to raise all of those. Yeah,
I was going to jump in and say one thing, because obviously the writer of Hebrews, the Christian New Testament, has one idea, but I want to say that that's not out of thin air that tradition comes. In fact, what we have is an anachronistic text in Exodus 16 that I think is the source for that pot of manna. and it's in Exodus 16, verse 34, and it says, well, let me back up to 33. And Moses said to Aaron, take a jar of the manna, by the way, anyway, and put an omer of manna in it and place it, it says, before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. And then verse 34 is, the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. By the way, there's no testimony yet. But again, to put something before lifnei ha'edut, before the testimony, you start putting these anachronistic things into the text, and before long, what was laying in front of the thing, now you just go ahead and put it in there. It's just, Anyway.
Yeah, quite right. And it's not just that, it's not the question of what exactly was in or inside it or before it. There is a question of, so first of all, where is the box kept, Ross?
Yeah.
Where is it to be kept?
Are you asking?
Before you answer that, the other question is what goes on top? What seals this box, and what is on top of that box? So where is it, and what's on either side? Go ahead.
Man, so you've got the testimony inside the box, and in the box, and then on the top of the box is what is called, at least in the ASV and other standard translations, the mercy seat, upon which are two cherubims. And then this entire thing is placed inside the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle, and I'm ready. So you're going to break this apart for us. Tell us what you think.
I'm going to break it apart. In fact, I think we get our first mention of the Holy of Holies in the end of chapter 26. Is that correct?
Maybe so.
I do think, and that's hang the curtain under the clasp and blah, 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 between the Holy and the Holy of Holies. So that's what separates it. Place the cover upon the Ark of the Pact in the Holy of Holies. That's chapter 26, verse 34. So what we have, Ross, and I mentioned that we were going to, again, revisit Ramesses II camp formation. But Berman points out that in the depictions that Ramsey created, he has, of course, the tents, and he has, the holy, if you like, and then at the back of that is the, if we were talking about the tabernacle, we'd say there's the Holy of Holies. But the
like an inner sanctum. So you've got an inner
sanctum.
Yeah,
that's right, and that's his own personal quarters, right? And the fascinating thing about that is that this particular depiction in Abu Simbel, the throne tent of Ramesses II has two cherubim extending their wings over his cartouche, and the cartouche is like a tablet with his hieroglyphic symbol on there.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
and there's so on either side of that are two cherubim with their wings extended over it, just as we see the cherubim spreading their wings protectively over the Ark of the Tabernacle. When you see it, and I really encourage people to look this up, and perhaps we can put a link underneath, but it is Ramesses II victory, his mobile wall camp situation. That's in the Holy of Holies. You have your two cherubim, and it's just undeniable imagery. Like, you can really see how someone has looked at this and gone, I like that. I like what we've done here. This has something to do with our Ramses II and Kadesh, and all of this has something to do, we recall, with the way that we came out of Egypt. This must have something to do with us. Let's appropriate this propaganda. Go ahead.
And did it have poles and all? Just like, didn't this Egyptian? I think I remember seeing an article on this one time where they were comparing, sort of like what we just asked of Ezra. The different connections or potential connections between what we see in ancient Egypt, particularly under Ramesses, and later Israelite descriptions in the priestly material. So,
it's remarkable.
Very, very fascinating, man.
What
the mercy seat,
Go ahead.
man. So let's talk about this mercy seat. This is a theologically packed word and it really, really takes off. A lot of people theologically talk a lot about this mercy seat because you talked about last week flinging of blood, and there's certain times when there's blood flung on the mercy seat.
Throwing. Yeah, that's right.
But what is this mercy seat? The Hebrew behind this basically means a top or a covering, a lid. And then on top of this, there are these cherubim. Now, what I want to do is I'm interested because of what's in the box, Jono, and some of the way that the 10 words talk about idolatry. To me, it feels strange that you would have creatures of some kind on the top of the box. And we've done programs on this too. But let me ask Ezra to maybe if there's a way to describe what is the Bible talking about when it says cherub. Because, a lot of people might have in their mind, most of our audience is pretty educated, but some might not know what a cherub looks like. Is it Cupid, the little cute fat baby angel, or is it something else? Let's ask Ezra.
Cherubim. Now there's a fascinating subject. Forget the chubby baby angels from Renaissance art. The biblical cherubim are something else entirely. In the Hebrew Bible, cherubim are often depicted as throne guardians. They first appear in Genesis, where God stations them at the entrance to the Garden of Eden with a flaming sword. In the Tabernacle and later the Temple, they are associated with the Ark of the Covenant, their wings overshadowing the mercy seat. The imagery suggests they serve as divine protectors or intermediaries, marking sacred space. But to really understand what a biblical writer might mean by cherub, we need to look at the broader ancient Near Eastern context. Archaeological discoveries and iconography from Assyrian, Babylonian, and Hittite cultures depict similar creatures, hybrid beings with elements of lions, bulls, eagles, and human features. These are often referred to as lamassu, or griffins. You'd see these figures flanking the thrones of kings or guarding palace gates, symbolizing power and divine favor. Ezekiel's vision in the Hebrew Bible takes this imagery to a whole new level. He describes cherubim as having 4 faces: human, lion, ox, and eagle, and wheels within wheels covered in eyes. This blends traditional throne guardian imagery with apocalyptic and mystical elements. Some scholars think Ezekiel might be drawing on Babylonian iconography or even his own experiences in exile, where he could have encountered such imagery firsthand. So while cherubim in the Bible are unique to Israelite religion, they're part of a broader tapestry of ancient symbolism. They underscore God's sovereignty and the sacredness of his dwelling. But they also connect Israel's imagery to a much older and wider cultural practice. Does this change how you imagine the Ark's cherubim? More wild and otherworldly, right?
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to walk away from giving the cherubim some serious consideration, particularly when you look at other depictions in archaeology, and then say to yourself, "This is not idolatry. This is not a form of idolatry." I mean, it really does fly in the face of the prohibition against idolatry, which is the first commandment. But it
don't make anything in the heaven above or earth beneath.
But it becomes a major symbol in Jewish history. In Israelite history. It really, really does.
What happens here, by the way, Jono? And then I just want to touch this before we do anything else. What, according to the priestly writer, what takes place right here between these cherubim, whatever they are? What takes place is this is where God speaks to the people. Look, let's look at a couple of verses. Chapter 25. Look at verse 21. You shall put the mercy seat, ASV, above upon the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony I shall give you, and there I will meet with you, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all the things which I shall give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. So this is like a speaker. Imagine going in, and this is where you hear God speak. One other passage, and that's Numbers chapter 7, another priestly passage. And
see, this is exactly
89.
Once again. This is a play on the imagery of Ramesses, because within his inner sanctum, protected by the 2 cherubim on either side, anyone who wants to know anything from Ramesses would go and consult with him, and he would impart to them his divine wisdom.
Wow.
Yeah, and so this is just taking from that and just and saying, no, this is Jehovah that is here, not Ramesses. Actually, this is Jehovah. So, well, again, you got to have a look at the relief in Abu Simbel.
So one other passage, Numbers 7:89, and when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with him, then he heard the voice speaking unto him from above the mercy seat that was upon the ark of the testimony, from between the two cherubim, and he spoke unto him. So there you go. It's this idea, and you're suggesting, and other scholars have suggested, that this is very similar to something they would have picked up in Egypt.
Yeah, well, specifically this relief. It's. I mean, Egypt also has a whole lot of cherubim type imagery, as to those other cultures that Ezra listed, but this specific relief is remarkable. I mean, the similarities are incredible. When you see it, it's hard to walk away and go, well, that has nothing to do with it.
Right.
And again, it makes me say that I don't think that they're just picking bits of random pieces. I think that, the historians of the day, if you like, in Israel knew that there was something to do with the Battle of Kadesh by which they were liberated from Egypt. But that's just my theory, but it is remarkable anyhow. It's not the only imagery that we find repeated in Israelite history. Well, of course, there is the menorah perhaps more so than the cherubim. And the menorah really, I mean, we have that everywhere. And it too is listed in our Torah portion. Ross, where do we find the menorah?
Chapter 25, I think, verse 31 through 40. Is that right?
Quite right. Right.
And funny that I had in my notes, I do like the ASV, but sometimes the translation, it's just not quite right. But it calls it the candlestick. You shall make a candlestick of pure gold. But it's a menorah. It's a lampstand, if you will. But that's where it describes it. So tell me what you're thinking about this candlestick, Jono.
Well, you actually brought me for the first time, I think, to where were we, in Magdala and the Magdala stone.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a depiction of the menorah, or a 7-branched lampstand there. And it's a little bit different to the one that we see, for example, on the Ark of Titus, which is the menorah that we see in the Jewish quarter, in the glass case, in the center of the Jewish quarter there, outside of the HOREB synagogue. It's a bit different, and there is a question about this, Ross, because early menorah depictions seem to have a tripod stand, and it's quite a simple 7-branch lampstand, as you say, or candlestick, as the ASB says. The Ark of Titus has something quite elaborate, larger, thick, heavy, which was carried away, after AD 71 when the temple was destroyed by the Romans. I've been there too, by the way, in Rome, and I've seen that. They're different. Which is more authentic? What are your thoughts?
Well, first thing, do you remember, we've done a lot of shows, Jono, I was just thinking the other day, but one of the things that we talked about one time was how many times the stuff was stolen from the temple.
That's
like
right.
if you just go through the Hebrew Bible and you say, all right, and they were invaded and all of the artifacts were taken from the temple, and you read it, but by the time you get to the destruction in 586 BCE, one has to wonder what's left of what was in the original anyway. So
what's
how
left
do we
and how
know?
Original are these? That's exactly right. How do we know?
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing. So I'm going to read. We've done a little bit of the Talmud in this program. We're going to do a little bit more. This is Rosh Hashanah 24b. It's actually the end of 24a and into 24b1. It says, Ross, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Now you wouldn't know this, and I'm sure Moses Shapiro probably didn't know this either, or maybe he did. But whenever we go to the Jewish Quarter or we walk down through the old city, every second item that's for sale is a menorah, right? It's a recreation of the menorah. But according to this section of the Talmud, Ross, a person may not construct a candelabrum corresponding to the candelabrum in the temple. However, one may fashion a candelabrum of 5 or of 6 or of 8 lamps. We can do that. But one may not fashion a candelabrum with 7 lamps, even if he constructs it from different kinds of metal rather than gold. As in exigent circumstances, the candelabrum in the temple may be fashioned from other metals. Now, Ross, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, also, this is what he says, one may not fashion a candelabrum of wood, can't do that, in the manner that the kings of the Hashmonean monarchy fashioned it. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
When they first purified the temple, they had to prepare the candelabrum out of wood, as no other material was available. Since this candelabrum is fit for the temple, it is prohibited to fashion one of this kind for yourself. Apparently this one, we don't know how, but this one is fit for the temple. Now, that's not what we read in the passage that you just highlighted here in chapter 25. In chapter 25, it's supposed to be of pure gold, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, one piece, I think.
One piece, but apparently now, after that, why did the Hashmoneans have to make a new one? Well, after the invasion of, the Seleucid Greeks, the Antiochus Epiphanes, right?
Yeah.
Came and desecrated the temple, sacrificed, pigs and pig's blood, this, that, and the other. And then he took all the stuff, all the cool gold stuff, including the menorah. He said, we'll have that. So when they finally gained control of the temple again, the Hashmoneans, the Maccabees, said, you know what? We need to clean this place up. We need to get rid of all this stuff. We need a new altar, really. We've got to do this and that.
Yep.
And it says in 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 49 to 50, it says, they fashioned new holy equipment and brought the lampstand, the incense altar, and the table into the temple, and they offered incense on the altar and lit the lamps on the lampstand, illuminating the temple.
Yep.
They made theirs, Ross, as the rabbis, as Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, from a wooden base, a wooden frame, which they put gold on the outside of.
Kind of plated. It wasn't solid. It was plated gold.
That's plated gold. And it has to be, because if you're going to make something big and heavy, and we know that gold is a soft metal, if you were to make one out of pure gold that size, it would bend under its own weight and then just sort of sag down, right?
Yeah.
So you can't do that. If you want to make it grander and bigger and more spectacular and this, that, and the other, you've got to have a timber frame. That is what we have in the Jewish Quarter. That's the one that we look at today. And that is modeled off the one that the Hashmoneans made, that the Maccabees made. And that is the one that is depicted on the Ark of Titus. It's modeled off the Ark of Titus. But it's not the original, Ross. But according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, it's still okay, since this candelabrum is fit for the... It just is, Ross. Don't ask too many questions. It just is.
Okay.
Don't make one out of wood either. Go ahead.
I was going to say a couple of thoughts. One, I'm glad you kind of straightened that out, because I remember my first trip to Jerusalem, and I think I took off on my own to run down to the old city. We got there at night, and I remember when I walked down and I made my way all the way down, at the time, it's in a different place now. As you said, now this menorah is in front of the HOREB synagogue, but at the time was, closer down. Anyway, but I remember wondering, because I wasn't sure, is this really the one that they've built to put in the temple? And, but I didn't know. The other thing that you just made me think of, it says that you can't make it with 7 branches. You've got to do it with some other number. This is perfect for our modern day, because if you get AI, I encourage people to try this. Have Grok or ChatGPT draw a picture of a menorah, create a graphic with a menorah, and even say, if you will, 7 branches, and see what it will do. it must
Really?
be following this rabbinic rule, because it'll give you 5, it'll give you 6, it'll give you 8, it'll give
8,
you 9, 10,
9.
12, 30.
It won't do 7. Is that right?
It
So you've done this
will
experiment.
I have done it. Well, I wasn't trying. I didn't know anything about this. I was just saying, hey, make this graphic with this guy holding it. Anyway, I was trying to create
We have to ask Ezra. No, we have to ask Ezra. Why won't AI depict the menorah with 7 branches?
All right, I'm going to ask him, but I think before I let him answer, I wonder if it's just that Ezra doesn't know that he and his AI buddies don't draw it correctly. Maybe
they're programmed.
Remember, originally they used to draw.
Good,
I'm going to ask it, but look. But
Come
remember now, sometimes initially they would draw a person and it would have too many fingers.
Yeah.
All right, so let's ask Ezra, why is it that I can't get a graphic from an AI model with the correct number of branches?
AI models often struggle with generating accurate images of specific, culturally or religiously significant objects, like the 7-branched menorah described in the Torah. The issue mostly comes down to how these models learn. AI image generators are trained on vast data sets pulled from the internet, where images can be mislabeled, distorted, or just plain inaccurate. When it comes to the menorah, the internet is flooded with all sorts of candelabras, Hanukkah menorahs, which have 9 branches, decorative menorahs with artistic liberties, and even non-Jewish candelabras. The AI doesn't inherently understand the religious and historical requirement of exactly 7 branches for the biblical menorah. It just tries to match patterns in its dataset. There's also the challenge of symmetry and counting. You'd think counting to 7 wouldn't be an issue, but AI models often struggle with producing exact numbers of repetitive elements, whether it's fingers on a hand or branches on a menorah. The model is more focused on aesthetics and approximating the request rather than following strict rules. From a biblical standpoint, the 7-branched menorah's design is quite specific. 3 branches on each side of a central shaft, with almond blossom designs and cups. It's not just a functional lampstand, but a symbol laden with meaning, perfection, creation, and divine light. When an AI generates an image, it doesn't get any of that. It's just guessing based on visual similarities. If you need a truly accurate representation, it's often better to go with an artist familiar with the tradition or rely on historical and archaeological depictions, like the famous image on the Arch of Titus in Rome, which, while not without controversy, at least gives us a sense of how the menorah from the Second Temple period might have looked. Have you had any success with specific prompts or styles that get you closer to the real thing?
Well,
so he gave a good answer. Yeah, good answer.
That. Okay, that's fair enough. But the older depictions, like the one that you showed me in Magdala, or maybe we'll go there again on the Tanakh tour in this coming November, shows a simpler, and I think a tripod stand. I think that one has a tripod stand.
Well, let me say one other thing on Magdala. A lot of people, our tour is the Tanakh tour, and a lot of people who are Hebrew Bible based, whether a Jewish group or a group like ours, more oriented towards the Hebrew Bible, don't go to some of these sites because they're traditionally associated with Christianity. But what I really like about going to some of these sites like Magdala and even Capernaum is that these represent these are ancient Jewish sites. They aren't Christian sites. These, particularly Magdala, is one of the oldest discovered synagogues. It's clearly one of, I think, 7 first-century synagogues discovered around the Galilee, and it's an amazing site. So if people come with us, maybe we'll stop by Magdala.
Yeah, because one of my favorite places for us is Mount Arbel, what we're just talking about. As I recall, I think Magdala is just down at the foot of Mount Arbel, is it not?
Yep, that's exactly right. It is absolutely right at the base.
Beautiful view of the Galilee, and it's just an incredible place to go. So we may have that on the itinerary. We'll have to double check. Yep. What else, Ross? I think we're running out of time here rapidly, but is there anything else that you want to pull out of this Torah portion of Terumah?
No, I tell you, this has been just a really fun discussion, and I'm also looking forward to next week. So maybe
next
we can.
Next week is Tetzaveh.
Oh, yeah.
27 verse 20 and on. We will be there soon enough, in fact, this time next week. And until then, Ezra, take us out.
Well, folks, that wraps up another enlightening episode of Torah Pearls. Today, we dug into the rich and layered world of Parashat Terumah, explored the architectural wonders and theological mysteries of the Tabernacle, and even ventured into ancient Egypt and Babylon to unpack the enigmatic cherubim. We touched on how ancient military camps might have influenced the biblical camp layout, and why even modern AI struggles to get the menorah just right. As always, we hope this conversation sparked some curiosity, and maybe even inspired you to take a fresh look at these ancient texts. Remember, the beauty of the Torah is that it keeps giving, no matter how many times we return to it. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share with your fellow Bible enthusiasts, and leave us a review. We love hearing your thoughts, questions, and of course, those deep dive theories that keep us all on our toes. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and may your studies be as rich as the gold of the tabernacle itself. Shalom.